The Archaic Sanctuary Ritual Body Postures is a debut full-length album from Invocation, a Valparaiso, Chile-based blackened death metal band or a bestial death metal band who have been around for about 10 years almost, and they began playing more of a form of bestial death metal. And what I mean by that, it's something that is close to war metal, but definitely has riffs. It has a little bit of that incantation-esque cavern core sound to it, but that's not exactly what they've continued doing over time. Their earlier stuff is worth checking out. It's very upfront and abrupt and full of riffs. And if you're a fan of everything from like Wrath Prayer or earlier Grave Miasma, where they were a little bit more cut and dry with some of their riffs, I think that's exactly what you're getting from this band up until about 2020, when they start to both meander a little bit with their atmosphere, incorporate a little bit more black metal movement, still cut pretty strong and hard riffs throughout. I really enjoyed their Attunement to Death demo or EP back in 2020. That was kind of my springboard into appreciating what this record is doing, and also appreciating that this one is a little bit different, both in terms of its production values and presentation, but also the way they've incorporated black metal a little bit more into their sound, so that the atmosphere makes sense, but it still allows them to cut solid death metal riffing throughout. And I think that's really what made this record stand out over time. So we'll cut to one of these songs and you'll get a sense for just the kind of brutal bash of it, but also the bestial, aggressive atmosphere of it as well. So if you know the incantation-esque side of blackened death metal in Chile over the last, I would say 20 years, from various different bands like Unuspricklick and Colton and whatnot, you'll understand where this band is coming from. They're kind of that dirt heavy style, but in turning towards the bestial side of things and creating a more raw recording, they find more blazing movement throughout this thing. There are some very brutal and blunt edged rhythms on this thing that cut through the noise, and it becomes a little bit more of a classic presentation as they bluster through a lot of these heavier grinding riffs. And I think what's cool about that is that they're not going full war metal with it. This doesn't sound like Antichrist Siege Machine so much as it does something like Rotten Tomb, when they're not focusing so much on the more traditional side of things. What I mean is that the movement is a little bit more free, but the riffs are still blunt and very classic in nature. So the production values do a lot to generate this sound, and I would say that any other production value might actually illuminate a lot of the technique going into the guitar rhythms. So there is some aspect to this where you can tell the sound design was very specific, and it's got that archaic like filthy sound to it that is really satisfying on repeat listens as you begin to learn the general push through of the record as it attacks. And so for me, this was kind of the best thing about this record, is that it was designed in a certain way that it's not necessarily been polished up to perfection, but it's both legible and stylized to the point where it feels abrupt and immediate and aggressive, but when they slow down, it only gets heavier, and when they speed up, it's heavier in a different way. So there's a lot of dimension to this, even though it feels fuzzy and obscured in some sense. I think that's intentional. It's kind of part of the design of this, and that atmosphere is a big part of what makes this record so intoxicating as a repeat listen. And that's why I would recommend it. I think that it really was the kind of record where I could put it on repeat, and it just felt like a great death metal record, but also one that was blazing past in its own bestial apparition. It was pretty strong. Anyway, this album released on September 20th. You can go ahead and check it out yourself and see if it's your thing. It certainly was for me. This is one of my favorite records of September, and I'll be talking about it a little bit more at the very end of the month. So check it out for yourself in the meantime, and read my review if you feel like gathering more of my thoughts into better focus.